Good evening. And I welcome you all from different cities across the country and the world, as well as the web audience, which is definitely pretty international. So my name is Simon Jacobson, and I head a gathering here called Wednesday Night Live, going on for many years now, too many to count, but who's counting anyway? And just as a short preface or introduction, what my objective of this evening and hopefully all evenings is that we go away different than when we entered. And I mean for the better. Which means that we all have our life struggles, we have our challenges and issues. Issues is the operative word. Some of them are dealing with the demons within us and the ghosts that haunt us. And many of us are also including dealing with demons outside of us, whether it's at work or in the arena of our relationships, or other challenges that each of us struggle with. And it's good to know that despite all the difficulties, we also have resources, power, to be able to access a place of tranquility, peace, strength, courage, confidence to overcome any challenge. And it's actually an axiom in Jewish thought. When Moses was told by God to build a temple, a holy sanctuary for God, God said, "Asli migdash, build for me a holy space. Shachanti b'seichem, and I will dwell among you." So Moses asked God, how can human beings, mortals, finite, fragile creatures, contain you, create a abode, a home, an environment to contain the infinite? And God responded with a classic statement that becomes, as I said, an axiom for all of life. He says, "Keshani mevakesh," when I ask something, God says, "Eini mevakesh lefi koichi," I never ask for something on my terms. When I ask for something, I ask on the terms of those that I'm asking from, which itself is an unbelievable lesson in relationships and love, that when you ask someone to do something, if you're a kind person, a compassionate person, you're never going to ask someone to do something you don't think they can accomplish. You would not give a mission to somebody if they didn't have the tools and the resources. Essentially, God is saying to Moses, if I'm asking them to build a temple for me, it means I'm asking them something they're capable of doing. That within the mortal, and within the fragile, and within all the finite limitations of our existence, we also have an immortal side, our soul, and an infinite dimension that can touch the infinite above. And the same is true with everything in life. An axiom, a given, an unequivocal axiom in Jewish thought is that no matter what comes your way, the fact that it came your way means you have the abilities to deal with it. The fact that some people don't feel they have those abilities, or sadly sometimes people give up, resignation, and it appears like they didn't have the strength, that's due to our own myopic view, our own insecurities. It doesn't mean that we don't have the strength. It means we don't think we have the strength. It's not the same thing. If we only believed in what we thought, we're in trouble in the first place. So it's good to also know that there are some objective voices and forces out there, whether it's friends, mentors, or God himself, that has more confidence in you than you may have in yourself. And connecting to that is the key, obviously, to real growth. Because if you're going to depend on your own resources alone, you'll be trapped by them as well. So as I said, as a springboard or introduction to this discussion here this evening, I think this is a general guideline, objective, is that if we all can go away this evening a little better, a little more confident in our own inner resources, I would think that would be a successful class, successful evening. So, to continue the theme of this month, as I said, for those of you who were here in the previous weeks, the theme is love, based on Ani l'doidi v'doidi li, I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me, which is the acronym for the month of Elul. This Hebrew month is called Elul. Elul is a Hebrew word that consists of 4 letters, Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed, which is an acronym for a verse in Song of Songs, I am to my beloved, and my beloved is to me. Ani l'doidi v'doidi li. The connection to the month is definitely connected to the fact that it's a preparatory stage to the high holidays. Those of you that have been following along the 60 days, the book that I compiled, know that the Jewish calendar is more than just a technical scheduler, but actually a journey in life, and that the entire Jewish calendar throughout the year is a continuum that reflects the ups and downs of life. And the ups and downs of life really can be captured in the journey of love called love found, love betrayed, and love reclaimed or rediscovered. And these 3 stages of first finding something that seems to be happiness, losing it, and then refinding it again or finding a healthier form of it, is the story of our lives one way or another. Even though it sounds so simple, but it's, as we all know, it plays itself out in each of our lives in a different form and fashion. And that's how the calendar is structured. After the Jews leave Egypt, which we celebrate on Passover, a long time ago, so 50 days later, they received the Torah at Sinai, a gift, a blueprint for life. And then 39 days later, they build a golden calf and betray the mandate and the spiritual calling that they were offered at Sinai. So you could think that at that point it's all over. They screwed up, basically. Well, the story doesn't end there, it just begins. Moses goes back up on the mountain for another 40 days. And this begins the period that we have already passed, which is after Shavuos, which is on the 7th of Sivan. Moses goes up again. I'm sorry, that's the first 40. I'm sorry. He comes down, they break the golden calf, and they build the golden calf, and he breaks the tablets. That's the 17th of Tammuz. He goes back up on the mountain to ask for forgiveness, to try to fix it. And he spends 40 days and not successful. And then he goes another 40 days, which begins the first day of Elul, this is a special month, Elul, where he's trying to regain love that was lost. A betrayal, basically, a break. The broken tablets, the golden calf, the betrayal. And throughout this month, every day is a progressive day in trying to mend and repair that which was broken. And he will finally succeed, even though the first time they didn't know what it would be, but now we do. He will succeed on Yom Kippur. So the holiest day of the year is the conclusion of a 40-day period that goes through these 30 days of Elul. If the numbers sound confusing, look into the 60-day book. It's all written out there with kinds of graphs to make it a little easier to understand. But suffice it to say, it's not so technical. More practically speaking, is that we're in a period not just of love, but a love that is no longer naive. It's one that has seen pain and seen loss and working toward reconciliation. Because a love that comes after the break is much deeper than the one that comes before. The one that comes before, you can say, it says, yeah, it's great because it's based on so-called naive or perfect innocent situation. But once we see loss, once we see pain, can love survive that? That's the big question that we all have. Can we find something of beauty after beauty was tarnished in our lives, after innocence was lost. And this month of Elul, and the entire high holiday season, there's this one unequivocal affirmative answer that yes, it can be done, it was done, and it can be done in our personal lives and our collective lives. So therefore, discussing the theme of love during this month is not just incidental. It happens to be the energy of this time. It happens to be an opportunity that we all have. And interesting things, you don't have to wait till Rosh Hashanah for this new spirit and this new hope to enter into our lives. It can begin right now. As a matter of fact, it does begin right now. Because things are not, in the Jewish calendar, cold turkey, overnight magic pill, and suddenly Rosh Hashanah comes and everyone is healed. You can find me a synagogue like that, I would like to know. A community like that. Everything is a process. And mature people want to grow. You don't wait for a special day. The process begins now. And as we grow towards something, the more you prepare, the better will be the results when it comes Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Like it is with anything in life. You know, if you have to prepare a major presentation for a client or a resume to get yourself a job in this climate today, you're going to work hard at preparing. You're not just going to wait and wing it and say, okay, you don't have an appointment, and that morning you're going to just come in and do what you can do. You'll prepare and research and do mock trial runs and all the whole works. I don't know how obsessive you particularly are, but some people can be quite obsessive and compulsive. They have names for it today too. So you'll prepare. Why? Because you know it's a significant day, and you go. The way you enter is the way you prepare. That's the way you will enter. And the same is true in everything in life, whether it's sports, whether it's, God forbid, war, any area where you see excellence. We may see the end result, but you can rest assured that there's months, if not years, of training and conditioning and so on and so on. For that time comes, when the day comes, when it's something big is going to happen. So why should Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur be different? If you're going to meet your the messenger who sent you with a mission to this earth, it would be wise to prepare before you enter such a meeting. More important than just our resumes and our jobs descriptions. So the month of Elul therefore serves that type of role of preparation. And how do we prepare? Since we're talking about love and we're talking about betrayal, the break, loss, and reconciliation, is by addressing these themes. That's what I've been doing in the past weeks since the month began. We're now in the third week of Elul, or beginning of the third week. And last week I discussed it in different themes. But today I want to continue where we left off last week. Those of you that weren't here last week or didn't hear the class, it's fine, it's still self-contained, so don't worry about it. It's not like you won't be able to understand what we're talking about here, hopefully. On the other hand, knowing what I did say won't hurt either. Okay. So, so last week I focused on, especially using the opening verse of last week's Torah chapter, being that the chapters are connected to the time, as the Shalah says. So I focused on the words Kiseitze le'melchama alevecha. The portion begins last week that when you go out to war upon your enemies. And we discussed the word to go out. That the wars are outside of us. And you always can, it's your power to transcend and stand above any type of adversarial situation. So interestingly, as the Torah would put it, this week, the chapter is called Kisove. Last week's Kiseitze, to go out. And Kisove means to enter, to go in. So you have the two themes of going out and going in. So last week, the going out to go to battle. So I think it's appropriate that this week we travel the other direction going inward. Which is, the literal verse says, Kisove al haaretz, when you will enter, you will go into the land. Kisove is the word to enter. And in Hebrew, the word enter has many, many implications. It's not just a physical thing, it's also psychological and emotional. And it also reflects intimacy as well. When you enter into something, it's something more intimate. When it's superficial and it's on the outside, external, it's on the outside, it's outside of you. Entering suggests something that is, you dwell on it, you integrate, you go inward. Think of it a concept or an idea. You hear a new idea, so you can think of it in Hasidic terminology, it's called thinking of it in a makivdika way. Makiv means surrounding. You hear an idea, superficial, you pick up the basic principles. But then you go back to read it again, sometimes you see an article that intrigues you. So you may just quickly peruse it, browse through it, and then you read it again, or even a third time. That's called entering into it. You're delving into plumbing the depths of the theme. And if you really want to go deeper, you all know there are many, many levels. So when someone says, I got an idea, I understand a concept, we all know that there are many, many levels to getting a concept. There's getting it and there's getting it. You can initially begin to understand something. It doesn't mean you've entered. It definitely doesn't mean you own it yet. I hope what I'm saying resonates, because if not, that would mean that none of you ever went deeper than you did. I hope not. That's not the case. So you all know what I'm talking about. Now, what motivates somebody to go deeper into something? It's usually you're intrigued by it, something that's relevant to you, something that is you feel going to help your life. So here too, the Torah puts it this way, this week's chapter, even though technically it's talking Kisove al haaretz, when you will enter the Holy Land. It's talking about entering the Promised Land. And the verse continues about the mitzvah of Bikurim, which was the mitzvah of the first fruit. That when you will enter the land, and you will plant and sow your fields, the first fruit of the tree should be brought as an offering to God. But nevertheless, the focus and the name of the chapter is Kisove, is entering. And as I said, the contrast is impossible to miss. That last week it was about going out, and here it's going in. So this really reflects the two dimensions of each of our lives. There are things we go out to, and there are things we go into. And I think, as a formula, if you're able to review your involvements and see what are you going out to and what are you going into, I think that alone can be quite a revealing exercise. And maybe there's certain things you shouldn't be going out to and you should be going into, and there's certain things you should be going into and not out to, or vice versa. You should be going out to and not into. So what does this words into, out to mean? Think of it this way. It's a way of looking at yourself. So I'm not going to ask anybody how many hours you spend looking into a mirror every day. But let's look at a different type of mirror, not a physical mirror, which is the harder mirror to look at yourself. So when you look at yourself, if you can, with objective eyes, it's very difficult to look at yourself, if not impossible. But we definitely have two aspects to our lives. One is what's going on inside of you, and the other what's going on outside of you. I know initially it may sound very childish, but as you'll see, it's not that at all. It actually is a quite critical distinction. Because there are many things, as I just mentioned, that are outside of us that you've allowed into your life, and it can be destructive. You shouldn't have allowed it in. And there are other things that you should allow in that remain outside of you. As I said, if you're able to create a formula to know what should go and what shouldn't, that already is progress. And hopefully we'll get some of it tonight. So you may have, I may have discussed this in previous classes, just as a metaphor. One of the things that we discussed, the destruction of the temple in the last month of was that we also honor not just when the Romans and before them the Babylonians destroyed the actual temple, but we also fast on the beginning of the 3 weeks when they breached the walls of Jerusalem, around the walls around the city. And the question is asked, why is that a tragedy? The tragedy is the destruction of the temple. Why do we have to honor that, remember that? So obviously it's not a good thing. But the fact is it's only a preparatory thing. The real tragedy happened once they came to the temple and burned it down. So the mystics and the psychological mystics explain it this way, that each of us has a precious soul, like a precious child within ourselves, within your body. And in this world, which is can be a cruel, insensitive, and selfish world, this child, this soul, needs to be protected. No different than special cities that protect themselves by building a wall around them. And that's the psychological significance of a walled city, which has, in Jewish law, many implications. On Purim, the Megillah is read at a different day. Purim is celebrated. But what it means in personal terms is that a healthy human being has a wall around their more vulnerable side. The wall is a defensive wall. And that wall is the protection. You don't just let everything hang out. And you don't let anyone that wants to enter into your sacred space, vulnerable space, in. So you have a wall. But a good wall also needs to have gates. Gates are controlled by you, what's going to go in, what's going to go out. So 2 weeks ago we read in the chapter, Sheftim v'shoitrim titn lecha b'chol sharecha, that you shall designate and appoint judges and law enforcers at all your gates. And the Sif Sikayin with the Shach on the Torah, he explains what are all these gates. He says these are the personal gates that a person has. We all have 7 gates that allow things in or out into our lives. The way he counts it is the 2 eyes, the 2 ears, the 2 nostrils, and the mouth. Some other commentaries count the gates differently. But the bottom line is that there is really 2 entities. There's you and there's the world around you. Young children have to be protected by their parents and guardians. They shouldn't get hurt. As we grow into adults, hopefully, we build these walls, but we build them in a way where you also have gates that allow in and allow out the right things and the wrong things. So this commentary in the Torah is saying, basically, the Torah is telling us, designate the proper guards at your gates. Make sure that what enters into your life and what goes out of your life are healthy. I mean, again, it sounds simple, but today studies are being made of the impact of television on people's lives. How many hours you allow the visual to enter through your eyes, through those gates, into your psyche. And we all know, unless you're in complete denial, that what you see impacts you. You wouldn't be watching if it didn't. I'm not here to pour fire and brimstone on television or technologies, but we know the amount of hours, the average amount of hours that a child sits in front of a television. Now we also have an internet. And we have Facebook, of course. The all-powerful Facebook. I'm on there too, as I mentioned, and some of you may know, right? But there's being addicted, and there's being not addicted. That's the bottom line. There's being tools. Look, we use a telephone. Question is how much time we'd use it. Today we use it less, of course. And how much time do we have personal interaction, face to face? And what do our children need from us? I dread the day that mothers and fathers are going to say, I have a relationship with my children by Facebook. So you all know the story with the professor who became too smart for himself. And his busy schedule of writing books and gathering awards didn't give him enough time to present his weekly class at the university. So he came up with a brilliant idea. Technology. He recorded the class and asked an assistant to put the tape recorder, that's what it was called those days, today there's other gadgets, on his desk, and the students were required to listen to this tape and take notes, and then later they were expected to be able to, just as if he'd given the class. One day he happens to wander into this university, months later, and he decides to peek into the class and see how his brilliant innovation is working. And it worked better than he ever could have expected. He peeked into the room, and to his surprise or chagrin or whatever you want to call it, he sees no students in the room, but he sees tape recorders on every desk in the record mode. The students also, they learn by example. He's too busy, they're also too busy. So they all, at the end of the class, would come pick up their tapes, and that was that. This is called teaching by example. This is role modeling. Okay. So, what we let into our lives and what we let out is crucial. And if you really look at it, you'll find that we almost either don't have walled cities or our gates are completely messed up. So the first step in any introspection is to simply see what's going in, what's going out. When people say, I've got problems in my life, that's very nice. That's the state where you are right now. What did you let in? And what are you continuing to let in? You want to heal. We all want to heal. There's an expression called sheretz, Tavo v'sheretz biyadeh. One of these succinct ways that Judaism captures, the Talmud captures. Hatayvel means someone who's going to immerse himself in a mikveh, to sanctify himself. But at the same time, he has a sheretz biyadeh, he has in his hand something that is completely impure. We sometimes go with an intention to purify ourselves, to heal. But while we're healing, we're doing something that is causing us to be hurt. And we may not even see the contradiction. So it's critical to understand this inner, outer part of ourselves. First of all, to know who we are, and not confuse that what you've picked up from outside should not be confused with who your inner identity is really like, and vice versa. That your inner identity remains yours and is not something that's out there. So to put it in so-called it's called terms of child psychology, children's psychology, what is truly a home supposed to be like? I discussed it 2 weeks ago. A home is supposed to be an environment. I say supposed to be for obvious reasons, because it's often not that way. It's supposed to be an environment where you're completely comfortable with yourself. When you go to work, or in the street, or to a party, or to any function, or anything that you're meeting strangers, so there you have your guard up, you project, you dress a certain way, you do whatever it takes to be accepted, to be liked, to make an impression, whatever it is that you want to achieve. When you go home, a real home, a healthy home would be a place. It's not just about the people in the home, it's the environment. You could take off your masks, and you can take off your clothes, so to speak, and kick off your shoes, and be yourself. What happens if you grew up in a home that was a battlefield, where parents fought all the time? So those are people supposed to love you, but it was like a battlefield, and you were constantly judged or criticized. You never were able to develop that comfort zone that an identity needs to have to be able to be comfortable with itself. Obviously, you will not have confidence in yourself, because your inner identity, the inner you, never was nourished. I say never. I'm talking about an extreme situation. Obviously, most of us are somewhere in between. In other words, there has to be a distinction between what you do in the outer world and what you do in your inner world. Now, let's take this a step further. It's not just about a home, a physical home. It's the home within yourself. There are people, due to whatever reason it is, they're constantly adjusting themselves to what others expect of them, or what others want. Then, of course, there's the other extreme of a person who's a fierce individualist, and even making a statement never to appear like they're making anybody happy. I'm not talking about that either. As a matter of fact, some would argue that that person is equally insecure, but he has to express, or she has to express himself by being a rebel. Then there's a third person, which is harder to identify, but it's somebody that is themselves all the time. They're at peace with themselves. That doesn't mean, of course, you go to a place you can accommodate, you're diplomatic, you don't have to stand down and say, listen, I'm not like all of you. But internally, the person remains constantly secure. You can tell people like that when you talk to them. Most people in this world are not that way, due to the fact that we've been conditioned and trained that we have to adjust all the time. Think of it in terms of business and career advancement. There, it's all about, I don't want to use the word manipulation, it sounds a little too severe, but it's about maneuvering. Is that a better word? Get the idea. It means you have to make sure you understand your customer, your client, and adjust accordingly, be quick on your feet. So even if you're ethical and honest and transparent and all that, every negotiation has elements of that are deceptive. You don't show all your cards. You want to get more than what the other person wants to give, and vice versa. This is common practice, and even from the Torah point of view, it's not necessarily unethical just because there's a thing called masa matan, basic negotiations in business, as long as they're ethical guidelines and not outright lies and so on and so forth. But it's common. But what happens to your spirit in doing this for a long time? After a while, this becomes your common practice. This is what you do. Little children, not even so little, children in general don't know those skills. They haven't developed these tactics yet. Because they don't really go out and trying to get something from somebody. Officially, in a healthy situation, they should be not asking for it. If they don't get it, or they see the adults around them are manipulative, then they learn to be manipulative. In other words, a healthy situation is one where you are not necessarily having to constantly fake it or adjust. There's you and your inner confidence in yourself. And then there's the outside world where you enter into the battle, and you have very clear distinction between the two. Now, to take another scenario, you'll meet people, for instance, that are extremely cutthroat at work and in business. And they come home, they're like gentle lambs. And you ask them, how do they reconcile the two? It's two personalities. They create what's called compartmentalization. Does it tear them apart? Ultimately, yes, even though they may not know it, because it's really like a dichotomy. It's two different worlds. So what are you supposed to do? If you're going to be gentle like that in the workplace, you're going to be taken advantage of. If you're going to be a monster and a cutthroat at home, you're going to destroy your family. So it seems like a logical thing, a logical compromise. You're an animal in the street, and you're a human being at home, so to speak. And this actually is the classical biblical battle between Jacob and Esau. The Torah says Jacob was the scholar, the man Ishtamim, the pure, innocent one, and Esau, his twin brother, was the warrior. And actually, when it's discussed in the mystical teachings, spiritual teachings, the psychological model of that is that we have two sides to each of us. The warrior is meant to, if necessary, have to fight certain wars due to the fact that we live in a hostile world and there are enemies. And then there's another side of us which should never be compromised, which is the pure soul. This negotiation between the two personalities that I just described is far from simple and often destroys a person ultimately. And that's why it's so critical to look at it. So when we discussed last week the area of battles, and there are battles in life, there's no person that's immune from a battle here and there. Even if it's not up to you, there are going to be people who are going to do things that are going to cause a battle situation. It's up to you whether to engage or not, or to not be involved there. But inevitably you will have certain challenges in your life. Every one of us will. Of course, the wise person tries to avoid it. And also, when you're there, you minimize it. Remember, retreating isn't always the healthiest thing either, because that could damage you. So you need discretion in each case. When do you retreat? When do you engage? But one thing you don't want to become is a shark just because there are sharks around you. You want to maintain your integrity. But this is the single most difficult thing to do. How do you maintain integrity in a world that doesn't have integrity? Or in a surrounding, an environment that doesn't have integrity? This is why many mystics and many of our ancestors chose the life of asceticism. Even Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were shepherds. It was intentional. They did not want to engage in that. They went to the world of nature. Sheep are docile. They don't argue with you. And it's in general an environment that's conducive to prayer and meditation and so on. They went to that world. But if you read the Torah, you'll see it expects of us not asceticism. It wants you to enter and engage in a real way and still remain above it all. This is the ultimate challenge of life. And I don't think anybody can come out unscathed, but we definitely have methods of what to do about it. And this is very much part of the theme of this month of Elul. So in the context of love, all that I just said now is amplified. Because it's one thing you're talking about business, you're talking about called monetary or material things. When it comes to love, here's the question. Which personality do you apply in love? Is it the warrior or is it the pure soul of integrity? And sadly, most of us, again, not necessarily willingly, usually it's due to circumstances that we become victims to, or adjusting our standards based on other people, of start becoming and applying the so-called acheive mentality, the battler mentality, into an area that is supposed to be completely protected from that. As always, the best thing to do is create contrast. Because if you want to see how bad a situation is, you have to see how good it could be. Or else you really can't really estimate how bad it is. Not that I want to emphasize how bad things are, but if you want to appreciate how it may be, you have to see what light looks like. Or else you can convince yourself that darkness is light. So, in the purest form of it, as I've often mentioned, when you, for instance, teach art, even to beginner students, or music. So though it's only a beginner, you still show a student what the great masters accomplished. The art they accomplished, the musical compositions. Why do you do that? It can be very intimidating. Start looking at these masters, you say, I'll never get close to that. What's the whole point of getting into this? So it seems to make sense not to show a beginner the heights one can reach. But you do it not only to humble someone, but also to create a standard. You have to have a backdrop. If you don't know what a perfect circle looks like, how will you ever know that yours isn't perfect? So there's, as the way the Alter Rebbe, Shneur Zalman once put it, he said that Judaism teaches us how small you are and how great you can become. Now think about that, how small you are and how great you can become. There are many people who know how small they are. Sometimes they think they're smaller than they actually are. And there's some people who know how great they can become. It's called illusions of grandeur. But if you only have one and not the other, you have distorted perception. If you only know how small you are, you don't know your potential, so then you're basically, all your energy and all your goals and everything that you're trying to accomplish is written by a script, written by you, which is how small you are. So what kind of goals are you really going to set for yourself? What kind of confidence can you have? On the other hand, if you only know your potential and you say, I can do anything, which may be true, but you don't know where you are, you may convince yourself you're there already, or you're halfway there, which of course is not going to be exactly realistic, and therefore you'll never get there. So a healthy balance of knowing what your biggest goals are, and there's nothing wrong dreaming as big as you want, but also having a sense of where you stand right now, so then you can say, okay, here's the goal, here's where I am. And tomorrow or next year, I'm a step closer. So it's critical to have this contrast, which is one of the reasons we read in the Torah. People ask the question, why do we read about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah? I mean, we can never reach their heights. Look at some of their sacrifices, the prices they pay. But this is precisely the reason, because you want to have the backdrop. You know, they tell you when you buy a car that it can reach 190 miles an hour within, 30 seconds. Now, who's going to ever do that? But you want to know what the engine power is, even if you don't reach it. In addition, the fact is that they are our ancestors. That means we have a little of them inside of us. So it gives us strength to reach there as well. So in that context, let's talk about this inner-outer struggle in the context of love. To go back to what I said earlier, if a child grows up in a very healthy home, and love was given unconditionally, and the child's inner identity and inner confidence was constantly cultivated, the child was encouraged to explore, at the same time knew you'll be protected if you're going to ever get into a dangerous situation. I mean, you see this. Look at a little child, a year old. They're constantly exploring. It's unbelievable, adventurous side. But with a loving parents, that child also knows that I'm protected. The child picks all these things up. So it's like giving the child both those abilities, knowing that you will be protected, but you can also freely explore. What that builds up in a child is love. That's called love. As I discussed a few weeks ago, it's like water. It's like being submerged in water, protected, at the same time the freedom, the free abandon to try anything you wish. Of course, it requires some discipline, especially as a child can get into trouble. But the discipline too is part of the love, because it's not discipline just for the faith, just for as an end in itself. It's a discipline because you love your child. You don't want the child to do something that's destructive. That too is a lesson that's important. Some parents are such disciplinarians, it loses the love dimension. It becomes an end in itself. And there are ways to convey to a child that the discipline is also coming from a loving place. There are many ways. That's not so much the theme here, so I'm not going to go into that right now. So do you have an environment, and as I said, this is the backdrop. Is this a situation that you're going to find common? Not so common. But let's talk about the perfect situation, or almost perfect. Hypothetically, because parents also are humans, and there's no such thing as perfection. So here's an environment where a child, day after day, year after year, burgeons into an adult, grows into an adult, and it had all that nurturing that once it enters a more complicated world. And when that happens, it could be it begins in school at some point, the first time the child encounters a miserable teacher. Is there such a thing? There is, I can tell you. The first time the child encounters an abusive situation. I mean, there are going to be encounters like this. And as the child grows older, of course, these encounters begin to grow. But you have here a human being that has also seen what love is. So yes, the battle is a serious one. But you're coming in well-armed. You're coming well-armed, confident, loving. You don't have to accommodate everybody. You're not being judged by what you do and by what you accomplish for others, because all that has been built up. And now, how do you apply that confidence and strength to hostile situations? Doesn't mean that this child is not going to make mistakes, and doesn't mean this child cannot be taken advantage of. But there's a big head start here, because the child grew up with real love. And that love is what really will preserve this person and save them from the most harshest situations. Why won't a person like that get into unhealthy relationships? Because there's a very serious self-confidence, self-esteem. Take that away, and that person will be very vulnerable to predators and to other unhealthy situations. This is in different terms, in more psychological terms, what I said earlier, that this person's inside was allowed to grow before they went to the outside, basically. In other words, as I discussed 2 weeks ago, just like it is on a more microcosmic level, 9 months that are, each of us, spent in our mother's womb. So as I discussed, the reason for that God made it that way was because before you enter into this harsher world, God wanted a preparatory stage where you'll be surrounded completely protected by the waters of the embryo. So in a similar sense, the early stages of life should simulate that. Not quite the same way, obviously, it's not the same protection. But it's all in stages. In other words, before you release a human being out to the battles of life, the way it's meant to be is that you build up and fortify an inner identity. That's the bottom line. And direct proportion to how that inner identity will be built will be what happens later in your life. Given. Automatic. It's a guarantee. We'll discuss, obviously, what a person can do if they haven't had that, because obviously it's not all lost. But before I get there, as I said, I want to discuss the backdrop of a more perfect situation so we can talk about perspective, context. So, essentially, we first build the inner before we enter into the outer. Now, this makes complete sense. And this is what you would not do anything different to anyone you care about. As I said earlier in the beginning of the class, if you send someone out, let's say you hire them or you send someone to do a mission for you, accomplish so-and-so. So you're going to train them and prepare them well for any situation that will come up. No one that has any compassion in their heart is going to let someone else to the wolves without preparing them. So essentially the same is true in our lifetimes and our childhoods, that the early stages of love are meant to develop that and train a person to have those tools, that when they will encounter things later in life, they'll be able to handle it. This is the meaning of what goes on inside the city and what goes outside and what's on the outside. So when the Torah puts it, kiseitzu l'milchama, wars, they should always be outside of you. They're not in your intimate place. Kisave, this week's chapter, we enter into the intimate place. But sadly, as we move from the so-called perfect paragon and backdrop, and we move to real time and real life, not that black and white. That inner side has been contaminated by the outer, often prematurely, and vice versa. So what's happening here is that we don't have a completely walled city, if at all, and there's boundaries between who you are, your inner identity, your intimate self, and the outer world are blurred. And therein lies most of the problems in relationships. As I said, this doesn't mean it can't be rebuilt. The whole point that I mentioned of Elul is that we can reconcile and rebuild after loss. But to do so, I want to elaborate a little more on this intimate inside self. You see, the children model that I described, in a way it's very easy. If they're healthy parents, of course. What I mean by easy is, the child doesn't resist. The child will become what you shape it to be. If you give the child love and nurturing, as I described, the child will thrive. If unfortunately or sadly, tragically, you don't do that, the child will suffer. Be deprived. No different like a child that was deprived of other needs it has. So with children, relatively, as I said, simple in the sense that it's up to the adults around the child. The child will be completely shaped by those that shape the child. The child's too young to make such decisions. What schools to go to, what kind of behavior is going to be exposed to, what's going on at home, how much abuse or lack of abuse, where the parents will be around. When it comes to us as adults, here we're fully functioning adults. So you want to work with an adult, you have to deal with someone that has resistance, may not accept what you're saying. The whole works. And if we're already dysfunctional, you're now a dysfunctional adult is different than a child that has not yet been shaped or molded. As one of the analogies that's given is that we're all like warm balls of wax. In the early formative years, every experience is like in the warm wax is etched into the psyche. But as we grow older, the wax hardens, just like our arteries harden. Not to depress anybody, but that's what happens. And as we look at a child fall down all the steps, God forbid, they stand up and they walk. Their bones are nimble, they're flexible, they're still malleable, soft. I don't want to say what happens if we fall down the steps. It's quite a different story. Children roll around the snow. Try it out. So psychologically too, as we grow older, we become harder. And as we become harder, the wax is harder. It's not so simple now to deal with a situation because it's not flexible. It's not pliable. So as adults now, we're thrown into this world. And we need love. Everyone needs it. Yes, some people say you can't live with it, you can't live without it. You need love. But you're in a world that is hardly trusting, and you don't necessarily trust. I'm talking about especially somebody who's gone through some experiences. And now what? Which part of you do you let out? Do you expose and reveal? Which part don't you? Where do you use your so-called warrior skills? And where do you use your more vulnerable parts? And then there are people who become masters of manipulation on the vulnerable too. They also know how to use that as a weapon. Really gets messy. You ever met anyone like that? They're the most dangerous of all. So, love is an area where, of all areas of life, where this so-called blurring of boundaries is going to have most severe consequences. So I want to discuss, as adults now, what is this intimate place? What is happening to children when they're getting what they need? And what is it going on in ourselves when we become adults? What does that inner place look like? And trust me, that it's not a simple thing to answer. It takes a lot of time and energy. And I still have not mastered it. I'm sure no one masters it. Because as adults, it's much more complicated to address. Because you have to look at everything. Every perception, is that really from within? Or is that something that was taught to you? Or someone else imposed it upon you? So that's why it's critical to go into what we call the blueprint itself. It really means trying to dissect, or to, let's put under the microscope, what your soul looks like. The pure soul, untouched by life experiences. That's why we have, thank God, when you look at the books of Kabbalistic and Hasidic literature, that's what they do. They describe a soul. They describe a soul before it was touched by human beings, and before life in any way soiled our beings. And when you read it, even though you could say, well, I'm not there, but you'll see that it's unbelievably resonating. It brings you to tears. Because you start seeing yourself how you are, so-called everything that happened to you. You could visit that place. And I'll share with you something more. That when Moses went up on the mountain, and he was begging God and asking God to forgive the people for building a golden calf, you have to remember the consequences, the stakes were high, and the consequences were severe. This was not a small little sin that they did. God said in the Ten Commandments, I am your only God. Do not build false gods. 39 days later, not 39 years, 39 days later, while Moses is up on the mountain, the people decide to build a false god, a golden calf out of gold, money. Which in itself is a question, how is that possible? But crazier things happen in our lives. We've also been inspired, and then a minute later, look what happens. And Moses is up on the mountain, and God tells him, it's time for you to go down. There's trouble in paradise. There's trouble down on earth. And justifiably, God says, these people betrayed me. This is not, they didn't, as I said, a small transgression. The fundamental principle, am I your God or someone else your God? Are we loyal to each other? Are we going to protect each other? Are we partners or we're not partners? And the Jews clearly betrayed that agreement. So understandably and justifiably, God says to Moses, listen, you are not part of this. Why don't you go build another nation? Find yourself another people, and we'll start anew. Now, if Moses was interested in protecting his own skin, that's what he would have done. No, he marches back up on the mountain. He lets the Jews have it for what they did. But then he goes, marches back up on the mountain, and says to God, no, I'm not going to do that, and I'm here not to leave until you forgive them. Period. He settled in and decided he's going to stay there, and here he's arguing not with some difficult boss, with God, the creator of the universe and the creator of all the people. What did Moses think? What was he trying to do? God's argument is a very strong one, and it goes even further. God said, what do you want from me? I didn't cause them to do this. Life is cause and effect. You put your hand in fire, you get burned. They betrayed me. How am I supposed to have a relationship with them? It's not about vengeance. It's not about anger. It's cause and effect. They pulled themselves away, and there's nothing left to do. That's the way the world works. So what was Moses' counter-argument? And as you'll see from what I'm going to say now, Moses reveals in the Torah the deepest secrets of what an intimate soul is like. To the point that he even persuades God So what does Moses realize? Moses knew that there is a love here between these two entities. And he knew the secret of love, that if there's true love, nothing can break it. It doesn't matter what type of betrayal happened. That doesn't mean there's no accountability. But he also knew the secret that in relationships, trust is not built on perfection. Trust is built on accountability. So he knew he's going to get the people to become accountable. He was sure of that. But he wanted to tell God, listen, you created a flawed human race. You're telling me now to go choose another nation. And what do you think, that nation can't make mistakes? They'll also make mistakes, and then you'll keep going back to square one. I want a promise from you that if I get them to be accountable, that you can tell me that things that are broken can be fixed. Now, what was Moses' confidence based on? It was based on knowing the secret of God himself. He knew that God created the universe. He knew that God created flawed human beings. He knew that God knew they will make mistakes. And still he did it all. That means that God believed absolutely in the human being. The human being can correct. Why would he create something, know they can make mistakes and destroy them? There's no logic to that. In other words, he knew that there's a part in existence, as hidden as it may be, concealed as it may be, that is never affected, never contaminated by no matter what happens in our lives. And the way the mystics, the Kabbalists put it is that in a soul there are 5 dimensions, which, not incidentally, is the reason we have 5 prayers on Yom Kippur. Because Yom Kippur is when Moses achieved and reached the 5th dimension. Shabbos, we have 4 prayers. During the weekdays, we have 3. And Yom Kippur, there's 5. What are the 5 dimensions of the soul? It goes like this. In Hebrew, it's called Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. Nefesh, briefly, is the biological life. When you say someone's alive, what does it mean, I'm alive? So medically speaking, a person could, God forbid, be a vegetable in a hospital bed in a coma and also be alive. It's hardly what we would call life, but it's still live technically. So nefesh is biological life, meaning when the biological functions, breathing, the heart is beating, the mind is working, that's life. Then there's a thing called emotional life. That's ruach, second level of the soul. It's not just biologically functioning and that you're surviving, but there's also emotions. You feel. People feel for you. The third dimension is neshama, which is intellectual life. There's always the ability to explore ideas, to grow. And the fourth dimension is chaya, called transcendental life. The ability to transcend your personality. That even though you may have an inclination or an instinct to do one thing, you have the power to control yourself and not do it. To transcend nature, to transcend yourself. It's called the spiritual life of a person. And then the fifth, and the hardest one to access, is called yechida. Yechida literally means oneness. Oneness. The way the Eitz Chaim is the classic work of the Arizal, Isaac Luria. So he uses a quote, he speaks about yechida, he says, yechida is that, and I'm translating, paraphrasing, but almost close to the translation, he says, yechida is the innermost spark, the purest part of a human being, that lies within. If you're able to cut through all the layers, this is what you would reach. And it connects with the oneness of the infinite in one seamless bond. I don't know if any of you saw, sent it around to some people, links somewhere, on the TED lectures, the TED conference. So there was this lecture that was recently popular. I don't know, I forgot who delivered it. The woman that suffered a stroke. Anyone remembers the name? I'm sorry? The Maestro of Insight? Oh, My Stroke of Insight. But you remember the name of the lecturer? Anyway, a fascinating lecture. I just want to share one thing there that really struck me. She actually is a neuroscientist. And the reason she went into this, she says, is because her brother had suffered from mental illness, I think schizophrenia. And she then herself, as God would have it, suffered from a stroke. Being a neuroscientist, she was aware of its symptoms and understood what's coming. And she describes in fascinating detail how she literally goes, her left side of her brain, it was the right side of the brain, I think, that was struck, and how she knew, of course, what kind of consequences there are, until the point where she literally became unable to speak and so on. But one thing that she says there, which is mind-blowing, for me it was mind-blowing, not so much because she said it, but because it confirmed something that literally, words from the Zohar and from Jewish mysticism. She said that the right brain, and we all know the right brain, is the left brain is the methodical one, the one that deals with the details. She puts it, brush your teeth, get dressed, etc. And the left brain is the brain that sees the bigger picture, things, and she put it, sees everything in terms of a field of energy. Did I say the opposite? Okay. Left and left? Oh, I'm a righty. Okay. So the latter is the left brain, right? Yeah. Yeah. Well, left and right is all relative. I see my side as just as right. I didn't mean it that way. That's just. So, what she says is that when the stroke took full hold on her and affected her, which is rare thing, which for someone to document is rare. She realized that in general our right brain and left brain are working all the time. So there's no way to really isolate and say only one is functioning. So they speak to each other. That's why we're in the details. We could also understand a certain oneness. But in her case, because the detail part of the brain was, which is that, the left? I'm so confused, I don't even know. Yes, the left. No, there's the book, the drawing with the right side of your brain. So it's the left, that's the details, right? I'm sorry, huh? Yeah. That's what I'm talking about, yeah. So when the left side of the brain was, it's confusing. I don't know which side of my brain is working right now. I think neither of them. But I'm speaking to you from the heart. Okay. So when her left brain ceased functioning, what happened was, which is, I said, rare, she suddenly felt completely lack of identity and individuality. The way she describes it, and so by no means, she's saying it in a religious context, that she felt that she melted in as one large field of energy with everything around her. You have to hear it. If you want to get the link, just send me an email and I'll send it to you. It's pretty interesting. The lectures there are all a little shorter than mine. So they're, I think 18 minutes is the limit or something like that. Like the Shkia thing. Yeah. So the reason I'm saying it is because when you talk about Moses on the mountain, he knew the secret. He knew that his goal was to reach Yechidah. And he knew he has to reach it with hard work. And when he does reach it, he will be able to persuade God. So you could say, well, God had to be persuaded. Didn't God also know the secret? Yeah, but the secret is that human beings have to be the ones that elicit it. Because that's what love is. If you're the one that did the betraying, and you're representing the betrayers, you're the one that has to elicit it. I cannot elicit it for you. So at the end, Yom Kippur comes, God says to Moses, Salachti kidvarecha, I forgive you as you requested. Which means Moses prevailed. But he reached a place where God realized that Moses understood the secret. And once you know the secret, basically Moses was saying to God, you tell me about cause and effect, but that's a universe of causality that you created. You created that when a person puts their hand in fire, they get burned. So just like you created, you can also create hope. Somewhere, a back door where consequences won't matter if we're able to reach that place. Basically saying that we can reach an intimate place that precedes the damage that was done. But that takes a lot of work. So what does it look like, that intimate place? So there's an entire chapter in the Torah called Parsha Kisisa. It's a very cryptic chapter, actually. Very hard to understand literally. Where Moses talks about, where the Torah describes Moses' interaction with God up on the mountain. And the thing that Moses ultimately elicits from God is what we call the secret of the 13 attributes of compassion, the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim, which is the secret of intimacy, essentially. In 60 days in the book, which we have here, by the way, and if you're interested, you can get it. I'll be happy to sign it as a little advertisement. I discuss it in more detail. But when you all know the famous statement where where Moses says to God, "Show me your face, show me your glory." Hareini na chvedecha. And God says to Moses, "Lo yireni adam v'chai." There's no person that can see me and live. And then he says, "I will show you my face. I'm sorry, I will show you I'll show you my back, but my face you will not see." This is a cryptic verse in the Bible that's elaborated upon, and it's really the essence of what real intimacy is. So here's what Moses is saying to God. I want to see something, your inner dimension. A face is not obviously a physical face. I want to see your panim in Hebrew, primius. I want to see your inner dimension. I want to see you, not the way you manifest in the universe, in the glory, in the symmetry of nature, in all the beautiful creatures you've created, in the elegance and design. I want to see you, how you are in your purest form. So God says to Moses, if you see me there, you will no longer be able to exist. The only reason you exist is because I manifest in a concealed way. Because I manifest in the design and beauty of nature, that's why you can see me. If you see me in full glory without any garments, it'd be like looking at the sun, where you will be blinded by it. So it's not he didn't want to show himself. He was saying, you cannot continue to exist and see me this way. And this is what happens next. And then God says to Moses, but I will show you my back. Acheive means the opposite of panim is kisavai, entering inward. Acher is the back, is going outward. I'll show you my outer side. I will show you my external. And then he says, but my face you will not see. So the commentaries ask, why did God have to rub it in? He already told them you can't see me and live. Now you want to say, okay, I'll console you by showing you a part of myself. Fine, but he adds, but my face you will not see. And they answer that if you read the Torah with the right punctuation, it says the following. And listen to this is unbelievable. They talk about love and relationships. You're supposed to read it like this. You will see my back, upanai, and also my face. But my panai, you'll see by lo yiro, by not looking. In other words, you're supposed to read it, not that you'll see my back, but my face you will not see. That he said already. You will see my back and my face, but the face part you will only see when you stop looking. So God was actually complying and telling Moses the secret, how you see the essence of the divine. As long as your ego, as long as your personality, as long as your interests are being served, then it's you, it's not me. You want to see me on my terms, you no longer can come with your identity. You have the courage, God is saying, to do that. And when you'll have the courage, I'll let you in. Now you'd think, what does it mean he comes without his identity? Then who's left? Well, yes, that's this language that the ego speaks. The ego says, well, if I disappear, then I'm gone. I'm not ready to do that. But Moses was wiser and understood it doesn't mean annihilation. It means there's another dimension of you that's not your ego. Your ego is not all that you are. There's a part of you that is much more real than what you think you are, basically. So let me explain it a little further. I won't mention this here. What does, for instance, what is your left leg doing just now? So until I said that statement, you weren't even thinking about it. Most of you, I was, unless I'm really prophetic and somebody was thinking about the other. But I know we weren't, because I wasn't either. So did your left leg not exist before you thought about it? And I don't mean left, it could be the right leg, it could be your ear, your nose. Yes, it was there, but you didn't have to think about it being there. You know why? Because existence, being, does not have to feel like something. The sensation that I'm here, my presence is here, is not the real you. That's how you manifest in a sensation. What does health feel like? Tell me what health feels like. Anybody has a description of real health? As soon as you start describing it, you should see a doctor. Because health is not supposed to feel like anything. You're breathing normally, you shouldn't be feeling anything. You shouldn't be hearing anything, for that matter, almost. As soon as you feel something, that means there's an obstruction, God forbid. Or if you start hearing your heart, it's also not a good sign. So instead, we run, you feel your heart pacing. Yeah, that means your heart is trying to catch up. Health is the seamless and most smoothest thing that does not have a feeling or a sensation. Does that make it less real or more real? So we've been seduced by our own senses and by all the stimulation that stimulates our senses into thinking that which your senses feel, that's real. Everything else is questionable. Interestingly, the exact opposite is true. The most real things in your life you'll never sense with your five senses. So let's take the five senses. If you were to close your eyes, your ears, your taste, your touch, and smell, what's left? What's left? Initially you think, I'll disappear. You won't disappear. Then what's left will be the real you that is not defined or contained by your senses. Because you don't need eyes to see yourself, you don't need ears to hear yourself, you don't need nose to taste, touch, and smell to experience yourself. They are all, as I said earlier, gates. They're all there to interact with the world around us. With eyes, I can see you, you can see me. With ears, we can hear each other. With a mouth, we can speak to each other. If you're all alone on this earth, would you need your senses? So you need them, obviously, to gather food. Anything external outside of you, you need your senses for. Internally, you don't need your senses. So when it comes to someone saying, who are really you? You're someone that transcends your senses. That's yechida. And you cannot describe it because description itself, the experience itself defies expression. Describing the experience immediately means God saying to Moses, you're looking, you won't see. When you stop looking, you'll see. That's what intimacy is about. That's the secret. So talk about love now. We want love on the terms of our senses. So of course, I'm not suggesting that a hug and a kiss and physical touch is not an expression of love, but it doesn't begin there. Love is a supersensory experience that can manifest in the senses, but it doesn't begin and end with the senses. Love driven by technique is very, very superficial. But we've been trained and we're being programmed and brainwashed that what's real is the sensory world. You go out and get things, you buy things. So we're applying kiseitse mentality to a kisove experience, basically. You're applying the tools that we use to go out there and get things and conquer things to a world that cannot be conquered. Love cannot be conquered. No person ever controlled it, and no one will ever control it. And when you think you're in control of it, it's its undoing. People who think they're in control in a loving relationship, I want to see how long it lasts. Especially both of them think that. So yes, it will last if it's a little dysfunctional, but one person is the controlling, and the other person is passive and what we call a shmata, an enabler is the word in modern dictionary. Enabler, pleaser. Yes, those relationships, are they really working? Well, it's called mutual dysfunctionality. It works perfectly. Can it last? Is it enduring? Is it really love? I don't know if it's love. It's getting needs met, that's for sure. And it may have elements of love. But healthy intimacy is a whole different experience. It's two people celebrating their vulnerability together, and they don't have to be in control. It's what God tells Moses. You want to see me? You want a connection to me? Stop looking. Stop trying to get it. Stop trying to own it. And then you'll have it. You won't look, that's how you'll see it. Now, that doesn't come easily. Remember, this doesn't happen on the first date. It doesn't happen on the second one either. It takes work. And above all, as I said earlier, when we're born as children and we have that confidence, it's much easier to attain. The real problem is when you don't have it as a child. What do you do as an adult? That's why it's critical, first of all, to describe what it feels like, what it looks like. And when you do, and now the question is, how do we repair or how do we access something if we were not given a healthy head start? Important question. The problem is we're running out of time. So thank God that's what we always have next week. Called a teaser. What do they do? To be continued. But I will say something because I don't want to leave without any resolution here at all. The answer is, in brief, that we have that part of ourselves even as adults, even if we had dysfunctional childhood. The challenge is, how do you access it? Well, Moses, remember, had to access it also in an adult world where they had betrayed God and built a golden calf. So there was the same problem. So the answer lies in the way Moses did it. The answer lies in accessing that level of compassion. I'm not going to give you a quick trick here because it's not a magic pill that's going to solve our love and intimacy problem. I would suggest that you can know right away that it's a fake. But what we have to discover is that what we have to explore is that there are tools that each of us can enter into a place like that. And building on that confidence and knowing you can go there is the first step to getting there. I would think that many of us don't feel we can go there. We feel we've been hurt. We feel that other people are hurt. We don't know who we can trust. Who can I even imagine that will ever go to a place like that with me? So we compromise ourselves and we say, at least let me try to get something. Not at all. What I'm describing, most people will say is beyond my reach. So the first step is to eliminate that dismissal. Because as long as you're dismissing it, there's nothing that can be said that's going to let you experience it. So the first thing is to know that it is doable, absolutely. As a witness, I can tell you, I have seen people who've grown up in very, very harsh circumstances and have today that type of healthy love in a very profound way. In many ways, actually, their negative experiences help propel them there, but it took work. It takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of humility, above all. And the biggest humility of all is to know that you may not be right about your own expectations of yourself. The biggest humility may be necessary that just because you think you're damaged goods, it doesn't mean you are. I know that may sound a little weird, but the fact is that sometimes arrogance takes on the shape that, I know I can't achieve that, forget it, it's not for me. That is also arrogance. It means you're so convinced. How are you so convinced about your own destiny or about your own inner self? Have you spent a lot of time there? So I'm here to tell you that the story of Elul and the story of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, is really this story. To me, if Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur do not infuse in us hope in this area that you can actually experience true, healthy love and intimacy, then what is Rosh Hashanah exactly telling us? That what? That you're going to have a blessed year and find a job? That's nice, but that's surface. What it comes to tell us is exactly what Moses was up on the mountain fighting for us. And no matter what will happen in history and in life, we know that there is a power to access something that is beyond the break. So no matter what happened in our lives, we can access this type of place. Your yechida, that part of your soul, is unscathed, untouched by anything. Nothing that happens to a person can affect that part of the soul. That's the rule. The challenge is, how do you get there? How do you access it and let it speak to you? That's what we must address. And as I said, what we do is retrace the steps of Moses. If you want to preview a little more about this, I said the book 60 Days addresses it in detail, some of these aspects. And in our own personal lives, it comes down to exercises that you do on a daily basis that allows that part of you to speak. Remember, as we're speaking right now, as I said, Tavo v'sheretz b'yodei, as we're talking about this pure, intimate place, we're doing things that undermine it all the time. Because you still have the sensory stimulation that I was describing. It's not like just because you heard from me today that the soul transcends the senses, that the senses are not seducing you. We're still quite hypnotized and programmed by that. So the first step, even tonight, is not to go to sleep with the television on. Try that. Or check your email even. I know that's going to be too much. Let me strike that down. That's because I'm sure some of you will say, well, it's important emails. They're going to help me find my soul, etc. It's such emails you can look for if they're in there, between the spam. It begins right now what you're going to do. Because remember, the attack, the assault on your psyche, the assault on your yechida is happening as we speak, and as you leave this building even more intensely, and it doesn't go away. So the first question is, what are you going to do to get out of the line of fire? So you see how difficult it is. That means you've got to change something. Okay, that's really asking for too much, right? But if you want to go to that place, it's the only way. And I can tell you this, that if you begin, it doesn't mean you have to do it all, but if you begin the process by shutting down some of the overstimulated senses that we have, you're already getting somewhere. You have to shut it down a bit. And and the quiet will allow something else to emerge. It's inevitability. The yechida emerges when the other layers begin to be quieted down. It's like any music. The Zohar says every one of us has a song, a special hum. Would you like to hear the special song of your soul? Only you. No one that ever lived, and no one that ever will live can play the song the way your soul plays. Have you ever heard your own hum? I will tell you, you probably have, but you probably didn't think of it in those terms. You had when something deeply resonated, when you started crying about something for no apparent reason. It may have been an experience, it may have been seeing something. It's all usually unexpected and not planned. Something touches, but it goes away very quickly. That hum continues all the time. It's playing every second of your life. How often do you hear it? Once a year? Once in 20 years? Why don't you hear it? Well, turn on music tonight in your apartment or home, and then turn on another television that's blasting, and tell me how much music you're going to hear. Extra, what do we call it? Extraterrestrial? Extracurricular? External sounds that are, the street noise is going to drown out what we call the koil d'mama daka. It's a verse in Tanakh. It says that when Eliyahu, the prophet, was looking for God, for the Spirit, so it says first came a big wind. So he thought maybe God is in the wind. No. Then came great thunder. God was not in the thunder. And then came a great lightning. Actually, there was reverse. Lightning first, then the thunder. And God was neither in the lightning, thunder, or the wind. And then, the verse continues, Koil d'mama daka. A subtle, gentle voice emerged. And Eliyahu, the prophet, recognized that's the divine. It's not how loud it is. It's subtle. Subtlety is much more powerful than all the weapons and all the noises in the world. That's the part that is rarely cultivated in our lives, because we don't live in a subtle world. We live in a world that is in your face. And if they have to sell you something that's subtle, they package it as subtle too. But it's another package. True subtlety, the one that Moses experienced, by not looking, doesn't sell itself to you. It emerges. Truths that emerge can't sell themselves to you, because they emerge only when you push things away, not when you try to get it. Like Michelangelo said, that I see the angel trapped in the marble, and I carved and carved to set her free. All music of the soul, all truths and intimacy of the inner soul emerge when other things are pushed aside. So our work is not to try to extract the yechida, to try to find that inner child and say, come out of hiding. That's not going to work. It's by eliminating or minimizing other noises and sounds that distract us when that begins to emerge. That is the method. More on this, more details, we'll discuss next week. How many more weeks to Rosh Hashanah? Next week? And then one more week? 2. Right. So we have our work cut out for us. I want to say this as a conclusion. First of all, this class dedicated by, and the webcast was dedicated by Michael and Sephora Hirsch in honor of their dear son, Yehuda Leib Hirsch, whose upsherish is on the 14th of Elul, which is tomorrow. So Mazel Tov on that. And thank you for sponsoring this webcast and class. In his honor, may the Torah that was shared and the ideas and all the love that this will create, and he grows up from his upsherish when he's 3 years old, so we could give him some credit. If your relationships work out, let them know that it was in their honor. If any of you want to sponsor a class in honor of anybody or any particular occasion, please speak to me or call my office. And finally, I want to say that by the high holidays, well, not finally, I have 2 more things to say, is I will be doing the high holidays here in an intimate setting and trying to access this part of our souls. So first, I want to welcome and invite anyone that wants to attend. But be aware that finances should not prohibit you, because we will accommodate. Just call our office and tell us we have scholarships and other things. So it's not our policy that money should be a factor. to allow a person to experience a high holiday experience. So please be aware of that as well. For those of you that need to hear that, and please share it with your friends. Last year we did it here. Those who have been here know that was an extraordinary experience, including for myself. So please take advantage of this. My goal is actually to do something that no synagogue has ever done, which is actually to have a real experience. Not just one built out of guilt or out of obligation, but that truly can help us find a healing, and more, not just healing for the sick, so to speak, but find that inner place of love and hope that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are meant to be all about. And these classes are essentially a preparation to get to that place. So, more details about that, again, you can feel free to call my office and hear all the details, the times, the schedules. Even if you can't make it for all the high holidays, like I met somebody yesterday, and he may be even watching. He says, I never go to high holidays. So I said to him, listen, come whenever you want. So this is freestyle. You can come and go whenever you like. And don't feel any obligation of having to stay around for longer than you were. But you may be surprised I want to stay. That will also not hold you back from that. And finally, I want to say on the personal note, the discussion that we're having tonight, in giving a class like this, it's challenging and complicated, because the deeper you go into the area of the inner soul, on one hand, it's something we all must hear. On the other hand, the more unique each of us is. Generic ideas are good when you talk about more superficial things. When you talk about the more intimate parts of life, no two of us have the same journey. No two of us have the same music, as I said. So it's challenging. How do you talk about it in a way with a lot of people sitting here? It's not that easy. I'll share with you the secrets, trade secrets, how I try to do that. But above all, I want to say is that my main objective is to talk about the tools that each of us can apply, obviously, to our unique situation. And I've discovered that it's like music in general. There are only that many musical notes on the scale, but each of us plays it in our own way. So the key thing is to teach the notes, the tools, the mechanisms, and then how you apply it. That's our job. That's your job. Each of us in our own particular way. So that's how we fuse the two sides of it. So I want to say is, I hope some of the words I shared this evening, and in general in these classes, and including things I write, help each of you release that angel that is inside of you. Because you do have the music. I can't give it to you, because I didn't, and I can't take it from you. No one else can either. It's yours. The only thing is, you may not be aware of it. You may not be conscious of it. But the fact is, it's always there. And I want to bless everybody, even before Rosh Hashanah, that you should begin hearing your music more often than once a decade or once a year. And I don't just mean music in the poetic sense. I mean in the fullest glory of finding healthy relationships. Being able to hear the music in another person and they hearing it in you is really what the essence of a true loving relationship is about. And all the other stuff, money and technique, and all the other things that we think we define love by, are secondary. Some of them are important, some are not, actually. But the essence of it all is the music that two people hear when they let go. As Moses was told by God, when you will stop looking, that's when you will see. So I want to wish that you find that type of person in your life, and hold on to it for your life. Everyone have a very good evening. Thank you.